Hello, and welcome to Movies We Dig, a podcast about film, antiquity, and everything in between. I'm Elijah Fleming.
I'm Christy Vogler.
And I'm Colin McCormick.
And today we'll be talking about King Arthur, a 2004 historical adventure film directed by Antoine Fuqua and written by David Franzoni. This one was both fun and strange, I think, in sort of maybe the the order in which we watched movies, because I feel like we've almost watched this movie already in so many ways.
Yeah, but in some ways we, I think, did it wrong in that we watched this one after we watched like The Last Legion and Centurion.
Yes.
Because like this movie is 100% like the sort of predecessor to those. But also I think it was good that we watched it because this is I think a very natural successor or a follow-up to Gladiator.
Absolutely.
Not only because it's trying to be Gladiator, but also because we've got David Franzoni back at it.
Yes. So I will maybe like reserve a little bit of my final feelings, but Colin, Christy, do you dig this movie?
I do dig this movie. I still do. If I was more familiar with Arthurian legend I do have qualms about it, but and if I was more familiar with late Roman going into medieval period archaeological history, I'm sure this movie would upset me a lot more than it does. But to me, this is like our version of telling the Trojan epic, but Arthur version in some way, and all the anachronisms and all of the reimaginings of different characters just makes me happy, and I can go with it. But I think it might be one of those ignorance is bliss sort of things. So I'll leave it at there because we'll have a lot to unpack, especially the archaeological discoveries that inspired this film, because I don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah. I dig this movie, although I do recognize that it is, by most metrics, not a great film. Although I do think the thing I can go through with things I like, performances, generally sort of like them across the board. The plot, yeah, I'm okay. I give you a gentleman 6, And then I don't have actually, like Christy, I don't have many major bones to pick, but I'm not really expecting too much of this movie. In a certain way, I recognize that Gladiator is kind of a better movie than this one, but in some ways I almost enjoy this one more, and partially because I don't have as many hangups with this movie as I do with Gladiator, although as we were talking about the last episode, a lot of my hangups with Gladiator have less to do with Gladiator than more the way people have responded to Gladiator in the 20 intervening years. So I'll say, yes, I would give it a soft dig. I would give it an exploratory excavation of this movie.
Give it a test pit of
a shovel test, if you will. Yes.
Exactly. I test pit this movie. Or what do you do when you send like sonograms, or you do you get underground readings without actually
ground penetrating radar?
Yeah.
I would GPR this movie.
That's probably more work than a shovel test, to be honest.
Actually, yes, that's true.
Wait, seriously?
Yes. Oh gosh, yes. So it's one thing to just walk back and forth across the field scanning the ground, but then the processing of the images, because all you get is black and white kind of blobby wave things that you have to put.
And if you're on an incline, you have to make sure that you're adjusting for the amount of dirt, and the GPS is still there, and it's a nightmare.
I think I was maybe just spoiled by that scene in Jurassic Park where it just sort of seems like they just kind of give it one big boom, and then a perfect picture of whatever it is underground kind of pops up.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
Yeah, that's not how that works.
Least accurate thing about that movie.
Well, how about you, Laj?
I feel like I keep returning to this movie. I've seen it so many times. I saw this movie in theaters. I was the excited little 13-year-old who had a thing for Arthurian legends. Because don't all 13-year-olds have that?
I'm pretty sure I can remember who exactly was in my dad's car with me when we went to go see this movie in theaters.
Yeah.
And my dad had actually a great reaction to this movie that I've remembered for posterity that I'm going to share later as we come back around.
Oh my God, I can't wait. I just have one big sticking point with this movie that I kind of can't get over.
Can we guess what it is?
Please do. I think it prevents me from digging this movie fully.
Is it, why is there a noble Roman family living north of the wall?
That's one of them.
That was a big one for me.
Yeah, if this kid is gonna be the next pope,
Yeah.
what the hell is he doing?
Yeah,
in
why
Scotland?
is he there?
Yeah, I could understand like a wealthy family. They were given some land north of the wall, and now they need to be rescued. It's like, no, this guy might be the next flippin' pope.
Mhm.
Why
Like,
is he like
no.
so far?
It's-
Like he is literally outside the periphery of the Roman Empire, but he's gonna be pope. All right.
Yeah, when did this kid impress the pope so much that like the? Never mind.
So apparently that's not what Elijah has an issue with, but
It's not.
All right, Christy, that was my guess. Do you have a guess, Christy?
that was my guess too, frankly.
That is a very well-reasoned sticking point that I do think about.
I have a second guess.
Okay.
Is it Keira Knightley's outfit in the last battle?
No, love that.
Okay.
I love it, but it looks so painful. She doesn't have boobs, but like still, what little she has, they squished, and I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Look, female warriors have to wear scantily clad non-armor, otherwise how would we know that they're sexy? Obviously, this is just a rule.
To be fair, that's probably the least sexy warrior woman outfit. You know, Wonder Woman.
I mean, but why can't they just wear armor like the rest of them?
Because that would make sense.
Because that would make sense. Again, I think we're like wanting too much of this movie. But my main like issue, which just sounds really stupid now, is that like all of the knights of the round table are Sarmatians.
Okay, yeah, that makes
What?
sense.
What?
This is probably a good point for us to kind of rewind and just get like the premise of this movie and kind of the origin, which as I was reading, the way he describes it, Dave Franzoni like read this fact somewhere that there might have been, so like the Sarmatians are these people, the sort of these steppe horsemen people that probably lived in like Ukraine and surrounding areas in the 4th, 5th centuries and then came into conflict with the Romans. And I guess Dave Franzoni, the writer, he's hot off Gladiator. He's looking for the next thing. And he sort of came in somehow across his plate that there was like a group of these Sarmatian warriors transplanted into Britain as part of the Roman military apparatus. And then I don't know if this was him or whether he sort of read this also, that grafting this onto Arthurian legend, which sort of, you know, most texts sort of talk about Arthur as some kind of warrior who defended against the Saxon invasion in the 5th or so century CE. And I think it's the Historia Britonum, which I did go and take a little quick peek at, just trying to remember.
Well, and supposedly my perusal of Wikipedia, so like don't take me at my word at this, but supposedly it's called the Sarmatian hypothesis that was posited by C. Scott Littleton and Anne C. Thomas in 1978, but most scholars don't agree with it because there's just not enough evidence to support such a claim. And that's why I like the opening title card scene, whatever, is like, new archaeological evidence suggests this is the real story. And I'm like, what archaeological evidence are we? And so I was researching, it's like, what was coming out in the early 2000s that they're like, is it they're finding Sarmatian cultural artifacts near Hadrian's Wall and they're running with it? Or like, what? I can't figure it out.
The whole idea of there being a Sarmatian auxiliary unit in the Roman army is totally legit and like probably is at some point true, because the Romans did that all over the place. They had random auxiliary units from all of the places that they traveled to. It's just sort of like the empire thing to do, right? It's like you bond with the locals and you sort of learn each other's fighting styles.
Persians were doing that stuff, and you know they
Yeah.
had units from every part of the sort of Persian world, or and even the Greeks after them. Like, it's a thing.
Totally. And so I would have really loved if this was actually the story of a Sarmatian unit in Britain. That I think would have been really cool, but that's not what this is. I think they should have completely ignored the Sarmatian element to it if they were just gonna give them all Arthurian names. Like they're Galahad and Gawain and Dagonet and Lancelot. Like those are the traditional names that are like in the canon, whatever. Those aren't Sarmatians. Like what?
Yeah.
I feel like we're trying to smash two things together, and I would rather see one or the other. I would love to see the Sarmatian story, but that's not what this is.
maybe this just bothered me. I don't know what you all thought about it, but like it maybe bothered me just a little bit that if such a big sticking point that these guys are neither Roman nor Briton, they are sort of outside, they're strangers in a strange land serving a strange master. You know, they're not invested necessarily in this cause, but I don't know if it bothered you as much as it might have bothered me, but that like they didn't really seem to be distinguished in any sort of telling way from any of the other, like shy of just being constantly reminded that they are Sarmatians. There was nothing to necessarily distinguish them from, say, like Arthur or the other Romans, or, you know, everybody just was British.
Yep.
This leads me to, I'll save it for the end, but like what I sort of, my alternative, like what I would have wanted from this movie. But that's sort of like, they didn't seem to be in any, aside from a sort of passing comment about how they've maintained their original religion, or like they worship their gods. The Sarmatian Knights don't seem in any way distinguished from anyone. Like there's nothing particularly Sarmatian-y about them.
Not at all.
I will admit that is an issue I had with the entire film, is like, I have no idea of the distinctions that are being made here. Saxons, okay. Woads wasn't a real term.
Nope.
So you have a bunch of Celts, and sometimes mentioned of Britons, and like admittedly I had to like look up British timeline and when different groups of people inhabited the island again, because it's been a while since Vinland Saga that I had looked all that up. And so, you know, there's like the farmers are Britons.
Yeah.
And then the warriors are the Woads, but really they're all Celts, right?
I don't know.
And my other thing is, I love that Latin is being spoken by the priests and Celtic is being spoken occasionally amongst the Woads, and then everyone else is speaking English so we can understand what's going on. And towards the end of the film, my hypothesis shift is like, okay, Woads are pagans and non-Christians, and everyone else is Christian and or Saxon. Okay.
Maybe I'll just jump right to it. Like what I kind of wanted at the end, where at the end it's kind of this alliance between the Woads, or like, you know, these north of the wall, non-Romanized Celts, and Arthur and his 6 friends.
7.
Or however many there are at that point. But what I sort of would have wanted to see, if I could have gotten, you know, in there in the editing room, is that it should have been like an alliance between like the 3 sort of main groups, where we have north of the wall Celts, i.e. like the Picts, the Woads, whatever you want to call them, the south of the wall Celts, i.e. like the Romano-British, like the Britons who have been living in Roman society for the last couple hundred odd years, and who are sort of Celtic, sort of historically, but are sort of Romanized. And then maybe a couple of Romans who are hanging on or something like that, like just, you know, maybe members of the army or something like that, who could be from wherever, but for all intents and purposes, they're Romans who are hanging around. And then the Sarmatian, you know, so this kind of like 3-way alliance, you know, and that's going to form the new modern Britain, you know, which is this sort of layering of like Celtic and Roman. And then eventually it will also be Saxon and Dane and a bunch of other things.
And it would have all made sense if not for the random Roman estate north of the wall, where again you have to question, like, what are the actual dynamics here? Like, who is who in this situation?
That's the thing that bothered me most about this movie. Where, so just to like, for any listeners who maybe haven't seen this movie in, you know, the 17 odd years since it's come out, the first 2 acts are largely dedicated to the Sarmatian Knights, the auxiliary under Arthur, these sort of Sarmatian soldiers who have a Roman commander, and they think their 15 years of military service is up and they get to go home, and they're given one last mission to go north of the wall and rescue a noble Roman family before these invading Saxons get there. Which is like, on the surface, like that's a good sort of hook for a plot. But the problem I have with that sort of the noble Roman family north of the wall is that it's not even that it doesn't make sense historically. It doesn't even make sense in the logic of the movie. Like the movie is very clear that it's north of the wall is no man, you know, that's, we don't go there. It's wild, wild country. That the movie makes very clear. But then it's also like, why is such an important guy and his family living up in the, like, in order to get there, Arthur has to navigate through these enemy woads. So like, how did the guy and his dopey guards get up there in the first place?
Well, I like the premise too that the son is the godson of the Pope and beloved by the Pope. But like when they get there, the father of Electo is just like, this is land granted to us from the Pope. And I'm like, so the Pope hates the Father but loves the Son. I don't understand.
I know, it's like, why'd you get this land out here in no man's land where it's terrible?
And I think I know what the root of the problem is. The problem is Hadrian's Wall, which is they want 100%, it's going to be set in Dark Age Britain or Roman Britain, and it's going to feature Celts, so like they got to do the wall. In fact, they even built an actual replica of the wall. This whole film was filmed in Ireland, but they built like a kilometer of wall, pretty much like a replica. Like I read that they took like casts of the bricks at Hadrian's Wall in Scotland, and sort of so all the bricks are like the right size and things like that. And so they wanted there to be the Hadrian's Wall, but then that sort of contorts the plot into like, well, the guys got to live, they got to go north of the wall, and then you run into them. Because then the lesser order issue is like, well, why are the Saxons invading north of the wall? Why don't they just land south of the wall? Which is what they did in real life. And so what it probably should have been more like is like the Saxons are coming in and they're taking over Roman territory, and we need to go get this guy out. And he actually does live in like Roman Britain. Just do away with the wall.
That would have fixed a lot of things.
But then the plot of the movie can't happen. And again, you can't have your set piece at the wall.
Well, what was cool, what I was focusing more on was the fort that they all go to just near the wall. And I learned that's based off Vindolanda, where we've done a lot of cool archaeology there, and we know like there's the presence of women there, and we're really trying to reestablish what life in that particular fortress was like. So it's like, you're right, you could get rid of Hadrian's Wall and just have this well-known Roman fortress be this control of like, all right, we need to go get this guy out in the countryside, bring him here to safety in the fortress. Oh no, the fortress is under attack now, we all need to band together.
Yeah, that would have totally worked. I like that. And there's so much material to work with at Vindolanda. And all of the things that are usually disintegrated by like drier weather have actually been preserved at Vindolanda, which I love. Like all in the mud, you have socks and shoes, leather and cloth and wooden tablets and all of this stuff. So there's just so much to work with there that would have been really, really fun.
It reminds me of that line. It's like, I hate this island. When it's not raining, it's snowing.
It's snowing.
I mean, they're not wrong on that.
No.
True. Yeah.
So this sort of leads me to another thing I want to talk about with this movie, which is very much like of its era. We're in the early 2000s. Gladiator has just been a huge critical and commercial success. And so there's this huge push in movies to get at that like we even sort of dubbed one of our sort of mini series about this, the gritty historical. There was a whole wave of like, we got to get down to the truth and the nitty gritty. And it's not just in these sort of historical epics. It's also like, I guess we're maybe a year or two out from The Bourne Identity. Like even like all across sort of movie spectrum, we're moving into this like gritty, dark realism. We're a couple of years away from Dark Knight, but that's going to be very much of that era. Or like the Bourne saga, everything is dark and grim. When they redo James Bond, like when is the first Daniel Craig James Bond?
I was in high school.
I want to say
2006 or 7. Casino Royale.
Hold up, I'm pulling it up. 2006.
I'm not saying I'm the smartest guy in the world, but like.
Oh, I did hear that Daniel Craig was up for Arthur in this movie.
Ooh, he would have been an interesting Arthur.
I know.
I do think Clive Owen did a good job, but like
James Bond instead.
I like Clive just fine. But yeah, so like that whole intro, like the title, I mean, this movie comes out the same year as Troy, which is again doing the exact same thing where it's like, we got to get down to the real gritty, historical, violent, which then makes sense where they lead. So this movie, so David Franzoni writes the script, Jerry Bruckheimer's producing it. He's also kind of high. He's on top of the world now because Pirates of the Caribbean has come out, which is the biggest thing ever, which is, again, hence Keira Knightley being in this movie.
Yep.
And Jerry Bruckheimer brings in. Fuqua is one of Bruckheimer's guys because Fuqua directed the music video for Gangster's Paradise, which accompanied the movie Dangerous Minds that Bruckheimer produced. And that's how Fuqua, and so like really we have Gangster's Paradise to thank for this movie.
Love it.
But Fuqua directed, so he directed that music video, which got him in, where Jerry Bruckheimer sort of like identified him early as young up and coming talent. And then Fuqua had just done Training Day with Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke, which is like a gritty, hardcore movie, where Denzel Washington pulls the car over in the middle of the intersection and makes Ethan Hawke smoke PCP. And so when you're thinking about it, like in that context, in that mindset, it makes perfect sense why they, because on the sort of surface, if you look at Fuqua's filmography, it's a lot of crime thrillers and action. And this one seems to stick out a little bit. But in another way, this makes complete sense why they would have pulled Fuqua to do this, because it's like, we want a gritty, contemporary minded, like hardcore action adventure. So like, let's get the Training Day guy. Although I would really have loved if Arthur pulled one of like Lancelot aside and was like, you're gonna smoke this. But
I hate Lancelot in this. We'll talk about that more later, I'm sure. But
yeah,
I'm sure you'll talk about this more, Colin. But like the other factor here, which I didn't realize but makes perfect sense, because I was obsessed with Keira Knightley as part of Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes.
And this was all around that same time. So there's a Disney factor here because Disney's involved.
Yes.
And I think Hans Zimmer also is doing the music again.
Yeah, and Fuqua in interviews since then has talked about that he's lukewarm on this movie, but leaning disappointed. And there is a director's cut that's a bit bloodier, that's kind of more in line with his vision. And because like he wanted it more, he wanted a hard R movie, and Disney pushed really hard for PG-13. And there's like, I was watching an interview where, so like part of like one of the changes is it ends up being, they make it sort of Lancelot is narrating the whole movie. That sort of happened late in the game, which is why I like, you completely forget that like Lancelot is the sort of lead-in narrator.
I had completely forgot.
I did too, yeah.
And why also the movie ends with a wedding. And there was this I was watching an interview where Fuqua was like, yeah, they wanted like, an uplifting. And so we ended up with this wedding, which is, I guess, uplifting. And like the way he says it, I was just like, oh man. Or you can tell I'm like Antoine, man, like speak your truth. I want to know what you really think about this. Where he's like, I want him to just go on and be like maybe it's been enough time, but I want to get the real deal. Or Fuqua is just like, man, this ending, like that wedding. I wanted limbs severed and like I wanted hearts broken.
Yeah, I did read somewhere that they did edit a lot of the blood out because it was originally filmed to be that sort of more Troy-esque, I guess, with like a lot of the blood spatter and like the super intense violence. And I think I would have liked that movie better, maybe, if this was rated R.
I think so too. Well, and someone pointed out, like already with Arthurian legend and Disney being involved, this was one of the reviews. It was like, no one at Disney would greenlight an old-fashioned talky love triangle with a hero who dies and an adulterous heroine who ends up in a nunnery. So it's like, it's really funny to think about. This has been a Disney-fied version of Arthurian legend, but that's pretty spot on.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, but also this movie I feel like has almost nothing to do with Arthurian legend. There is maybe a glancing acknowledgement of the sort of Lancelot Guinevere love triangle in that there's some glances exchanged between the characters.
Yep.
And the names are all Knights of the Round Table names. But outside of that, like this isn't...
Well, okay. Merlin, a.k.a. Stannis Baratheon.
Wait, that's him?
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, wait. What is your guys' default Merlin? Like when you think of Merlin, what is the first representation of that character that comes to mind?
Like
Disney
Sword in the Stone.
Yes, of course it is.
Yeah.
I can't get it out of my head.
Merlin is actually one of the things I don't like about this movie, but we can come back to that.
And apparently Merlin's a late addition to the Arthurian legend anyway. He comes much later from most of the original story, so yeah, I don't know what else to say about him, but
yeah, well, because this movie doesn't really have much to say about him. He's like kind of an after. He's
do anything.
Yeah, he's barely a character. He's just sort of like the leader of the Woads, like whoever they are. And he has one conversation with Arthur where he's like, "You're Britain too, and like maybe we should work together."
I had literally forgotten that he had lines. I thought that he just like stood in the forest and looked scary,
which he does very well.
Yeah.
Upon a rewatch, and I was like, "Oh, he does talk. Oh yeah." And I feel like they could have used that character to better work with the different factions if we're, trying to band together to fight the Saxons. Like Merlin could have been a bigger part.
His literal device is to give Arthur a backstory for how he got Excalibur.
Which then doesn't go anywhere.
It doesn't. Like, I actually didn't need Excalibur explained at all.
No.
His role in the story is very sort of perfunctory. And Fuqua has talked about Excalibur where he says something about, like, it's not that, like, Excalibur is actually a magic sword. It's more of, like, a metaphor for, like, coming of age and being ready and overcoming your demons or whatever it is.
Which, great. Love that. But, like, I feel like then we didn't need the nod to it, I guess.
So we get like an initial battle where we introduce Arthur and his knights, where we have almost like a Last of the Mohicans scene where the caravan with the bishop is getting attacked by Picts, and then Arthur and his knights come and save the day, and we meet Bishop Germanus, who's just like a sneaky, oily little prick who's there to basically free the knights, but really he's there to give them their last and most dangerous mission. And he kind of represents like everything that's wrong with Rome / Catholicism.
Yeah. And once again, like the hero Clive Owen here, but like could have been Russell Crowe, basically, is like has this very idealized version of what Rome is, but now also like what Christianity means, and has this like kind of fun, equality bent, which I think actually worked really well with his idea of the round table.
Yeah.
Which is like the, equality in this room, and we have no secrets and blah, blah, blah. And I like that he was then disillusioned at the end, that there was some progression in his feelings. Because I don't know, I feel like in Gladiator it almost didn't get quite he was always disillusioned, and so there's like no growth
Maximus
or no
never
change.
bought into a Rome.
Yeah.
Well, in the very beginning, but it becomes very much not about Rome for Maximus.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, and I think that's something important to consider here, is because like we are still looking at Rome is like talked about as this big thing, but also a place that you can go to, and there's no indication if Arthur has actually ever been to Rome, but he talks about it as if it's the most amazing thing ever seen.
It seems to be that he hasn't, like, because it's the idea is that his mother was a Briton, and his father presumably was like a Roman military officer or something like that. And because I think at one point the Electo kid, he says something where it's like the Rome you're imagining like doesn't exist. Yeah.
And they executed your teacher like years ago or something.
Apparently is historically not true, but
well, Pelagius lived like 20 years before this is supposed to happen, right?
I was looking this up. Well, first of all, Pelagius, a guy I had never heard of. This movie is teaching me things, but real guy had a sort of it's now my fun fact, it is still considered heretical, but Pelagius had this Pelagism. He was a British priest. Apparently St. Augustine of Hippo, who's a very important early church leader, not a big fan of Pelagius. He was excommunicated and condemned and was killed, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know if his teachings actually involve like equality for all. They had to do a lot of, I was reading a lot of his teachings had to do with like original sin, and like that we're actually not born with original sin, which is the kind of stuff, if you ever take like a course or you study late antiquity, there are so many of these like breakaway sects of Christianity that get like really into like Arianism, that's all debating about like the tripartite nature of the Godhead. And then they get excommunicated and all these like wild, they just seems like the people are going crazy and like blaspheming each other and killing each other over like these strange little technicalities. But I don't know. What do I know?
Yeah, no, I remember taking a Byzantine history class in like what the Council of Nicosia. I still don't understand the argument being made of the nature of the Holy Spirit that literally displaced hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah. The iota of difference.
Quite literally.
Yeah, no, my biggest thing that I kind of liked was that all the real Romans were assholes. And like,
yes.
And especially with the bishop, like getting that Byzantine aspect going of like, they stand on ceremony, there's all these steps, you have to like look a certain way. So you're kind of getting that connotation, and like, no one really likes the Romans. But then you have this question of, on the periphery, like, but we're fighting for Rome. And what is the meaning of that? Like, what are we actually hoping to get out of it? Like, yes, these men want their freedom, but they also want the last 15 of their lives to actually have meant something. Like, it wasn't a total waste, which I thought that premise, whether or not they're Sarmatians or not, I thought that was really cool of just. And I liked after the first battle, they're all riding back on horseback. It's like, 15 years up, what are you guys going to do? Like, are you going back to Sarmatia? You've got Boris is planning to stay and marry the girl he's had, like, not quite sure how many children with.
And be mayor of his own village.
Yeah.
At least 10 children.
Yeah. And I thought that was that was actually really probably the part I really liked about this is like, okay, yes, we're all fighting for this capital city we've never seen before, we've only heard about, but like, what does that really mean to us, and like, what is going to be the impact on our lives once our military service is over? And I thought that was a really cool aspect that this movie was exploring. I don't know how well they did it, but it was interesting to me. I liked that.
And I agree with that. And I think at the end, after sort of Arthur's disillusionment with the idea of Rome, he stays to fight to like not protect the idea of Rome, but at least my understanding was to like protect the people that were there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it doesn't matter who they are, it's like these are people and we need to protect them. And I really liked that as a character motivation for him.
Yeah.
Was just like, yeah, I am trying to do the right thing by what I like, the teachings that I, have deeply felt, and I'm gonna do my best, even if that means I'm gonna die. And it sort of seemed ridiculous at the time. He's like the one guy on the hill in his armor. But I liked that as a motivation, as I'm protecting these people no matter who they are.
Yeah, and here's like, just the movie is missing like a scene or a couple, even just a couple of shots. Is like, we don't really ever see the people in question. Like we see the woads, I guess, but most of the woads we see are when they're like warriors. We don't, and we get passing glimpses, I think, maybe of like regular villagers and farmers. And I think at one point, Stellan Skarsgård says like, there's just a few dozen villagers back there, like, I'm gonna slaughter your people. But just in like the text and the visuals that the movie is showing us, it kind of seems like Arthur is fighting over an empty field.
Yes.
I think that's why I like the fortress so much as a setting. Like Vindolanda, like I'm gonna call it Vindolanda. They didn't ever give the fortress a name, but like Bor's wife serving people, everyone kind of taking military and civilians. She sings a song that like speaks to everyone there. To me, that was like one of the coolest moments of like, what would these blended communities look like?
The first 30 minutes of this movie, I think, are doing great work, like setting the stakes, introducing us to the characters, like setting all those tensions up about how these characters are fitting into the world. Like, because I think the movie really gets bogged down in the rescue plot line. But like, it seems like what we're missing is a scene where the people in the fort or the garrison, I mean, some of there probably would be people there, and some of them are just civilians, or some of them are like, hey, we have families here, we're very much sort of rooted in here. And like the Romans are like, okay, we're leaving. But like, and some of the Romans, like maybe the officers are like, yeah, we're going to go back to Rome now. But there's other people who's like, look, we're like entrenched here. Like we can't just pack up and leave.
Yeah.
And so that's where, the maybe some Roman soldiers stay back, or there's sort of Romanized Britons or whoever. And then that's like where you get this sort of this what's the word I'm looking for? Like mosaic of people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the character that I'm thinking of, so there's this character, Joel's, played by Sean Gilder, who's like I don't know how, he's like their squire or something. He's like the guy that kind of shows up, and he's the one that like, he's like, the bishop can plop his holy ass wherever he likes or something like that. And that guy's like kind of in the movie, but also not really in the movie. But like he, to me, would be like the perfect vehicle for like, as like a sort of Roman, like he, I think, is a Roman. It's unclear. He's either a Roman that's kind of invested in Britain, or he's a Briton that's joined the Roman apparatus. Like he's one of those two things. And he would have been the character that would have been like, yeah, like there's, there's families here, there's civilians here, there's X, Y, and Z. Which I can't believe I'm saying this, but what movie kind of did this? The Last Legion.
Well, I don't know if you heard this, or like, because I didn't watch that movie with you guys. So, but there is a scandal involved with this film, because the Italian historian and novelist Valerio Massimo Manfredi claimed that the movie was almost a plagiarism of his 2002 novel, The Last Legion, and he blames its mixed reviews as like what kind of mired down his the film adaptation of his novel for so long, and then just didn't have a good audience when it was released in 2007. So like, I
mean, it didn't have a good script or a good director or a good cast either. But like, well, it had a good cast, but it had a poorly used cast.
So don't watch it. Is what
It was such a bad movie. It was so bad.
Yeah, it's painfully bad.
So maybe Manfredi should be thankful that this came out and was imitating his art. I don't know.
Yeah, but I agree. Like Spartacus also really had that sort of lens focused in on the impact that sort of the wider world's movings and doings would have on just the people who were there. And moving in the ancient world, just like today, is so hard. It's like, how are you supposed to pick up your entire life? And I think maybe Bors and his 10 plus children are a good example of this. It's like, if you have a family with someone who is from this land, are you just gonna leave all of your wife and like 10 plus children? Or like, and he's not, right? Like, he plans to stay, and as a lot of veterans did stay where they were posted, or got land somewhere nearby or something like that. So yeah, I think that would have been a helpful view.
Random side thought, because I think Colin commented on the fact that the love triangle between Guinevere, Arthur, and Lancelot never played out. It's like, that's because it was happening with Bors and his wife the whole time, to the point he's like holding his infant child. It's like, nah, you're all Bors.
Should we talk about the knights? Because I think this might be a good time to talk about the knights. So
yeah,
yes.
Who's everyone's favorite knight?
Mads Mikkelsen.
Tristan used to be my favorite, and I kept having flashbacks of like thinking the Falcon was going to die, and I'm like, why am I having these flashbacks? It's like, because that's what happened in The Mummy.
Yeah, you're thinking of The Mummy Returns. Which, by the way, have you seen Oded Fair? It had like a TikTok or something he put out where he's got like a chicken. He's like, "Fly, Horace." Oh, we gotta find it. It's fantastic. He's like going around on his farm, like basically reenacting scenes from The Mummy Returns, and it's so funny.
Oh my god, my heart! I can't take it.
So I had that moment with Tristan. It's like, I really liked him, and like he had so few lines that it was really good. But this time I watched it, I'm like, no, I'm here for Bors. Like,
yeah,
I was questioning first, do I like him? He's kind of like your
Well, because at first, he has problematic language in the workplace where he keeps telling his coworkers about his penis, which is like, we got to get HR in here.
Yep.
But then when you get back, I'm like, you know what? Actually, Bors is kind of great. Like, he's a family man. He's participating in childcare. He seems, him and his wife.
He wants to get into local government.
He's got a bromance with like the top. Okay, and what?
Are they brothers?
Yeah. So
Dagonet.
So it's Ray Stevenson, and then the guy who plays Bors is Ray something else. They were both named Ray.
Ray Stevenson, and then Ray Winstone is Bors.
Yes.
So we got the two
so
Rays.
Ray Stevenson is Dagonet.
I mean, Ray Winstone, great British character actor.
Yeah.
Every role he ever plays, he never loses his like Cockney accent. He's always like, yeah, I'm Bors. They never change. Even he was in Black Widow, and he's like, yeah, I'm Bors. I'm a Russian super oligarch. I just talk like this.
Well, I think my favorite moment is like when they're told they have to go on this one last mission, and like Bors is like pissed off and like angry, and they ask him, it's like, are you going? Of course I'm going. You all die without me. I'm just saying what you all want. I'm just saying.
I think he turned in my favorite performance of the movie. The moments like when after Ray Stevenson dies, and he's like, he's already free.
Yeah.
All that stuff. And Ray Stevenson also, who is the origin of the great River of Ham story.
Yeah.
Because he's, what's his name? Volstagg, the voluminous, or I forget what his epithet is in the Thor movies. Volstagg, the mighty.
Yeah. But he plays a really different character here, and I really like it.
Yeah. He's
him.
like he barely speaks.
Yeah.
The one line that gets me is when he's in the prison and he pulls out the little boy. He's like, do not fear me.
Yes,
and I'm like,
also great line reading.
Apparently it's endearing because that boy loved that man.
Yeah. Can you imagine being pulled out by Ray Stevenson and go, you will not fear me?
Yes, sir. Okay.
Yeah, because he's like the dutiful, quiet one.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he's such the opposite character. My default Ray Stevenson is HBO's Rome, which he plays like a very opposite, like very boisterous, loud.
He's Titus Pullo. He's like, hard drinking, womanizing, partying.
And so this kind of like quiet, stoic, like extremely caring, like he was, sleeping in that infirmary wagon, like with the people that they rescued. He was like sacrificed himself on the ice lake to save everybody. Like great Ray Stevenson. Love it.
Who else do we have? So actually, I kind of like this is maybe the unpopular choice, but I do kind of like Joel Edgerton as Gawain. He has less of a sort of clearly defined character, but I just sort of like him. Maybe I just like his look.
Yeah.
The look works. I agree.
It's a good look. And then we got Hugh Dancy as Galahad.
He's like, he could disappear from the movie and I wouldn't know it.
Yeah.
For me. I don't know.
I mean, it's hard to carve out because, like, Bors has, like, such a very sort of loud personality. Dagonet has kind of his own thing going. Tristan very much stands out because he's, like, a samurai or something. Like, he's just, like, weird.
Yeah.
They're, like, so... Mads is making, like, so many choices because, like, I remember when I first saw this as, like, a teenager, Mads was the one that stuck out to me because, like, this guy rules. He's got a bird. Like,
he's got the bow.
Yeah, he's like the bow. He seems to be doing all the legwork. Like, he's their tracker expert because Arthur keeps going, like, go scout ahead. He's got face tattoos. Everything about him is like, this guy rips.
He's the one that seems like the least Roman. Like, I could see the knight being a non-Roman, like, was from somewhere else.
And even like the armor at the end, their armor that they wear is like vaguely like Central Asian, like he's got almost like a Mongol-esque or like a Russian kind of looking hat going on.
That could have been actually Sarmatian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, they should have been just like a bunch of Russians.
No, I think Lancelot is perhaps the weakest.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't like him.
We should talk about Lancelot. Nobody likes him. I don't. He is the one that. Maybe it's the goatee.
I just don't know what they were going for because he's not a likable character.
Yeah, he's like sleazy is the sort of...
Yeah, but there's nothing redeeming out of that sleaze. Like, he doesn't rise above it in any way.
Like, he's Tony Stark, but take away the charm in a certain weird way.
Well, because, like, his opening line narration, like, when he's explaining why the Sarmatians have to fight the Romans, his, like, comment is... better they had died that day. And that, like, really sums up his attitude for the whole damn thing. It was just like, we should have never been here in the first place. It's all stupid. You're all stupid.
Everything sucks, and I'm mad about it. The whole movie.
He's like an angsty teenager.
Yeah, he's the one that's sort of most dissatisfied with their station and is, like, very pissy about it.
Which I think is important to consider, that being conscripted into an army, you do have to have that, like, naysayer resistor. Like, this sucks. This shouldn't be how we are treated. And yeah, better that the Sarmatians had just died that day than to be basically enslaved by the Roman army. And I think that's an important viewpoint to present out there, as this, like, mix of, like, all of these people creating the Roman collective. Not everyone's going to be, like, all for what's going on. But it just, the way it was depicted through him just made you, like, and he was the only one really to voice it in that way. That he's just not likable as a result. So it's like the message was important, but it didn't play out well.
And he's the one that openly butts heads with Arthur in a lot of scenes. And then again, there's like the hintings of that there's like a romantic jealousy aspect going on, perhaps, or something of that nature, though that never really bears fruit. But it sort of seems like he sort of seems positioned like he would be like Arthur's second in command or something like that. Like, he's the chief knight. I don't know, but his character sort of never really, I think Christy was saying, like, there's not as much to endear us to him. You know, like, he maybe could have been a character where, like, he is Arthur's sort of second in command and sort of outwardly facing his public face. He's like, I'm going to do what Arthur says and then when they have these backroom conversations, he's like, I got all these doubts and grievances, man, or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, here, he's like almost openly hostile and rebellious.
Yeah.
And like why he goes along with everyone else is like not fully.
Yeah. What's also in a way that just isn't constructive, right? It's like he voices all of his doubts, but I feel like there wasn't ever the okay, how do we make it work sort of moment where it's like constructive criticism, but it's still like we're trying to work together to save our little found family here, right?
And I'm thinking also just in the kind of to sort of think metatextually or something, because like this era was also the year where I think Hollywood was trying to make Ioan Gruffydd. I forget how he's Welsh. I'm mispronouncing his name, but I think it's Ioan Gruffydd, the leading man, because he was Mr. Fantastic in the Fantastic Four movies, which never really, I mean, it wasn't that the movie didn't succeed or fail necessarily on his shoulders, but like, for whatever reason, he just never really popped as a Hollywood leading man. And I think he's mostly been like character actors since then. I got to look up his IMDb, see what he's been in, because he seems to have.
He's like one of those faces that you recognize from like,
Mhm.
oh, he was there.
He's like in Titanic. He's the guy in the rescue boat.
Yeah. But I think of like the other people to come out of their first go at the Fantastic Four is what, like Chris Evans and is it Jessica Alba? Is that who?
Yep.
that
Yep,
is?
Jessica Alba's in, and then Chickless, who was in The Shield for a while.
Yeah. So like other people that have gone on to be rather successful while he
Yeah.
has remained
Languished.
somewhat in the background.
Yeah, I'm looking at his IMDb. Yona's been doing steady work
Okay.
since then. He's in a lot of TV. He was in Forever. He's in The Reunion, the TV miniseries. He's in Harrow. He's in Liar. I think a lot of British television series.
Okay, good for him.
But he never really like ascended into leading man.
Yeah.
Dumb in a way that I think this movie was maybe potentially a stepping stone for that.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that it maybe kind of was for Clive Owen. Although Clive Owen, if I've got a good grasp on Clive Owen's career.
I think my favorite Clive Owen is like not mainstream Clive Owen.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot 'em up, Clive Owen.
Yeah. I mean, he had Children of Men, which is fantastic.
Which was a great
But-
movie, and it was so
Yeah.
perfect in. And I don't know. It's like a different level of movie, right?
Yeah. And then we're also leading on Keira Knightley, who, as I was reminded, and it kind of maybe spoiled the movie a little bit for me, she's 18 in this movie.
It's weird. It's weird, and I don't like it because Clive Owen is like 40.
Clive is almost 21 years her
Let's
senior.
be serious. That's almost accurate for the ancient world anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, cringeworthy here, but
But it still made me uncomfortable.
The thing is, like, if you didn't know it, you would never suspect it necessarily.
right.
And maybe it's because we were younger at the time when we saw this movie, so it didn't jump out to me that
she'd
these
already
two
done.
figures would
She'd
be.
already done Pirates of the Caribbean, at least the first one, right?
Yeah, she was, which she was 17 in, which is
Mhm.
also like when you think about it.
But like Orlando Bloom is much closer in age to Keira Knightley than Clive Owen.
Yeah.
not as much as you'd think, I think.
Yeah, no,
Really?
not that much though. Like,
So Keira Knightley was born in 85. I just know this. Orlando Bloom was born in 77.
Okay.
So he's 8 years her senior.
Okay.
So
okay,
she
not as
was
weird.
17 and he was 25. in
I
Pirates.
always bring this up like for age differences, but the most recent Phantom of the Opera where Christine was like 16 and Gerard Butler and what's his face were like in their 30s, and that always freaks me out.
yeah.
So it's just it's weird. Why? I don't know. Why do the actresses always have to be crazy young?
Keira Knightley was really. I mean, yeah. In general, we can question that. I know she was like that. The only thing
She
I
was
knew
really
her
big.
before that was
I know.
Bend It Like Beckham, and I
That's
love
Mhm.
Bend It Like Beckham. So seeing
Yes.
her in Pirates was really exciting. That's what got me excited to see this movie. Was I loved Keira Knightley and seeing
Sure.
what she does, and I'm sure that's what Disney was kind of trying to feed off of. Is like, well, everyone will know her as Elizabeth from, so
Yeah.
they'll come for that, which got me for sure. And like otherwise, it's like this, the same problem we had with Gladiator. You don't really have a female character other than Keira Knightley present.
It's true.
And Guinevere is kind of a weird character in and of us because there's like things about Guinevere that confuse and confound me a little bit.
I agree. I think on a rewatch this time, I just watched this last night and I was like, what is she doing? Where did she get that dress?
Like,
Why
who,
is
like
that
who
happening?
is she? That's just like, who is she? Like they say, like she's a woad, like she's some north of the wall Celt. So at some point she got captured by that. What's his name? Honorius, the
Yeah.
Father of
the wealthy
Leto,
Roman.
that's all I got.
yeah
And was in creepy pagan jail.
Mhm.
yeah. Who we can assume Honorius, that the guy the Pope hates because he gave him the worst plot of land in the world. So she's in pagan jail.
Mhm.
And then she's rescued by Arthur, who like resets her fingers. But then later, because like I think like there was like a missing line or like a missing scene or something where it's like, oh, she's actually like a princess or is like someone really important, because then it's like, well, why is she like leading the warriors at the
Right?
end?
I guess my sense was like, yeah, you're right. There's something missing, that she's somehow connected to Merlin, like because she's
Mhm.
the one who leads Arthur to
Yeah.
having the conversation,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and like how I view her, and I think this is what a lot of people said, is like I viewed her as Boudica, like not an actual Guinevere, but a Boudica
Sure.
figure.
Yeah.
Other people pointed out to like Queen Medb from Irish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's history or myth. I like when we get into the Gaelic stuff, I'm in trouble. So
The other thing we also have forgotten, another name we've left out, is the historical consultant for this movie, who is a Mr. One John Matthews. I don't know if you looked into this guy. Oh, he's a novelist, and I'm just gonna come out and say it. Everything I saw about this guy, he's a dang ass freak. He's just like a weird dude.
No.
He's published over 90 books on myth, Arthurian legend, and Grail studies, and he's particularly, him and his wife are into Arthurian legend and, quote, esoteric Celtic spirituality. So
Okay, that tracks.
yeah, like that sort of, to me, like explains a little bit the characters of Guinevere and Merlin, esoteric Celtic spirituality.
Yeah.
well, and that's why like the film almost felt like they had to give a whole different name to this group, and like why I keep questioning, it's like, aren't they all Celts? You have the very recognizable farmhand, who I assume are also Celts, and then you've got the people hiding in the forest, firing off barbed wire traps, which I think was cool, but like,
Yeah.
again, seemed very like they're people of the forest, and I was very
it's that kind of like essentializing, nativizing
Yeah.
of
Mhm.
the Celts and other group, like in, that we're gonna see in like Avatar,
Right.
For sure.
the James Cameron Avatar,
Mhm.
like that kind of, like, these people are spiritually in touch. They're in touch with nature. They live these like foresty lives, and that kind of like primitivizes
Yeah.
them.
Mhm. Well, we don't really see them, the Woads, which are just Picts, and they didn't want to call them that, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't
Like, we
know.
don't see them being normal. They're always, like, in war paint in the
Mhm.
forest, like,
Yeah.
about to fight. It's like, where the just, like, normal people live.
And also, a lot of the imagery and like the way it was framed, I think, was kind of taken particularly out of like Last of the Mohicans, like when they're
Yes.
waiting in ambush for the Romans. It's
Mhm.
like there very much is this like unspoken like perceptions of like Native Americans or something. And again, that kind of like this like idea of like the noble savage or something
Mhm.
like that is getting like projected on. And it sort of seems like from the scenes we get with like Merlin and like his council or whatever, it just sort of seems like when they're not ambushing people in the forest, that the Celts just kind of like hang around campfires in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, it's and like you got the added level of it when they get to the estate, and as Elijah said, there's pagan jails. They're like, okay, so they're pagans. So we have converted Britons, they work,
Mhm.
and then you have pagan forest woads people. But then like I think there's a line from Merlin, it's like when he's talking about Excalibur, it's like that was forged from the iron of our island. So it's like, so you have iron smelting, which suggests you're not just hanging out in the forest the whole time.
Well, I think like even like famously, like the Gauls, I think, like, and this is way back, like in pre-Roman times, like they're the ones who are, I think, they were preeminent metalsmiths and
Mhm.
metal
Mhm.
workers. And I think like chainmail
Yep.
is like a Celtic invention. Like again, I think it's a case of like our representation of Celtic peoples, particularly in our Roman context, is like very much influenced by like North American,
Absolutely.
Native Americans. And even like you get it a little bit, I think, in like Braveheart, which I feel like is a movie we should have talked about a little bit more when we were talking about Gladiator, but like Braveheart is like very much in the DNA of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, just like the idea that they're fighting for freedom, which they say
Mhm.
a few times, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like our freedom, like from Rome, our freedom from like violence, or like free to like make choices, and
Mhm.
yeah, I didn't see that sort of in the context of Braveheart before, but I like it's all coming together now. It's like this massive puzzle in my head.
Yep.
God.
I will say the other absolute favorite moment I have in this movie is with Guinevere's character, and I think it's because it's one of the first times, which surprised me for a Disney movie. Like, there's two different occasions where like conquest acknowledges the fact that women are raped, and like so my favorite line is like Lancelot's like, "There's a lot of lonely men out there," and Guinevere's quip is like, "Don't worry, I won't let them rape you," and like her very clearly saying rape, and I'm like, that was kind of mind-blowing for the time, of this acknowledgement of like what is going to happen to the women, what's going to happen to Guinevere if they're captured, and like just a very clear understanding of like, yeah, that's what's going to happen, which I appreciated because it's so absent from so many of these films, that is what is going to happen to either they're going to be raped or they're going to be killed, because
Yeah.
the Saxons just want to obliterate everyone. Those are the options.
I found it like annoyingly quippy.
Two thoughts, which is like, one, like shit like this is why we don't like you, Lancelot, because like what a crappy thing to say.
Right.
But I was wondering, like, how does that joke land?
I don't know. It seems kind of shocking because you're like, oh, it kind of does sort of take you aback, I guess, which is maybe what they were going for. But I kind of like rolled my eyes, I guess. I was like, it feels too quippy. It feels.
That's totally fair. I think just the fact it happened is what blew my mind. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
we're actually going to say it. All right.
Yeah, we said the word.
Yeah. Again, like, this is a PG-13 movie. Also, when we first meet our villain,
Yeah.
which maybe this is a segue for that, but when we first met our villain, there is a attempted rape scene, which he, you know, is quickly thwarted, although it's not better. She just gets murdered.
Yeah.
And then Stellan Skarsgård, our Saxon, kind of espouses this like racial purity thing.
Which apparently came from like the idea based on linguistics that there wasn't intermingling of Saxons, and it's like that's been very disproven. But like, so they were kind of promoting and that's not to say that there weren't interactions like that would happen where invading groups would come in and they would not in fact want to mix with indigenous populations, but that would not be the case here, most likely.
No.
I also like that it was an Achilles moment. It's like, we have the right to war of spoils. They're like,
yes.
You're like, that felt like a nice little throwback to Achilles for a minute.
Yeah. That guy that died was, if Achilles was not as good at fighting.
Right?
Yeah, that would have been the Iliad's alternative. Shut up, and we're moving on.
So I mentioned this, like my dad's one takeaway from this movie that I can remember was that Stellan Skarsgård is basically the barbarian godfather, because that's like kind of the way he's playing it. He's like, we invade this island on the day of my daughter's wedding. Like he's so like whispery, like that's his whole kind of. I mean, which I think is like it was a choice, like on Skarsgård, because Skarsgård also is an interesting villain choice, sort of as well, because he's not like he's a tall guy, but he's sort of like a middle-aged, sort of dopey Swedish guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in Pirates
right
around this time. But... Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think what else he was in. I mean, like Good Will Hunting,
Marvel.
Yeah, he's the Dr. Selvig.
Yeah. In the American version of A Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, he's the big bad guy.
Okay.
Yeah, I like him as the bad guy. Actually, he's kind of like. I don't mind the whispery weirdness on a rewatch. I think I hated it when I first saw it. I was like, what the f*** is happening? Why am I scared of him? But I enjoyed it on the rewatch. It was a different type of villain.
I also, one thing I questioned. So, like, their goal of going to the estate to steal the sun for a ransom makes sense. I can get on board with that. But Rome is retreating. The Woads are in disarray if, in fact, all of them retreat. So once the ice battle happens and, okay, we lost the family, just sit tight for a while, let the Romans leave, and then take over what's left.
Right?
Don't take on a fortress.
Yeah, I don't really get what they were actually trying to do.
They existed to be antagonists.
Yes,
I mean, because... as we sort of talked about, like, it doesn't make any sense that they would invade north of the wall.
When they could just land south of the wall.
Yeah.
And engage in just pillaging. Just pillage for a while.
Yeah. Because historically, as the Romans were sort of pulling out of Britain, the Saxons were moving in, but it was not in Scotland. It was in East Anglia, in sort of eastern England. And you know, they were just sort of taking over that way. And then they would eventually establish their kingdoms. But yeah... I lost my train of thought.
Well, just that the enemy's motivations make no sense.
The ransom made sense. I was on board with the ransom. Then it did make sense.
Well, the ransom part, yes,
But yeah, so it's like, what do they want?
I guess they want land, because he says, like, kill every man, woman, and child who could ever, like, pick up a sword. So they want... Yeah,
are they there to settle this place? Because if so, doing it without women would be an interesting strategy. Or are they there to pillage and just get money and then leave later? Are they there to make it their own? Like, it's kind of unclear exactly what...
There is a campaign that needs funding, but I don't know what that campaign is.
Yeah, they're long-term goals.
That implies that Cedric is paying his men.
Which is interesting,
Or Cerdic.
actually.
But not with women. That's a no.
So, yeah, like, it's part of it is just like they're just here to kill people. And I think someone says at a point where it's like, Saxons only claim what they kill and they only kill everything.
Yeah.
So I guess they're here to take over. Although, again, the killing all human beings strategy is kind of a weird way to take over. But
Maybe their first wave, and then the second wave is bringing the wives and children.
Yeah.
Possible.
On there.
I do feel like once you hit the wall, it's like we could find a better strategy than just going through these mysteriously opening doors.
This was actually, I forgot, this was the thing that I have a hang up about, which is who is opening and closing those freaking doors?
Who is there?
How are those doors magically opening and closing?
At one point earlier in the movie, they show them like having to get giant mallet hammers to like.
Yeah, and like horses, like it's like a whole process to open the doors. It's like, you know, it's like King Kong Island.
Yeah, no, I feel like they would have made better strategic decisions about the wall, and that battle is just a bit odd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like once they all like meet, you know, like the action is there and it's happening, but just the way that the battle begins is just doesn't really make sense.
Well, yeah, so the wall the door opens, and he's like, I'm gonna send a small contingent through. Let's just see what happens to them. And those guys get chewed up. And then he's like, okay, now we'll just, the gates open again. I'll just go through with the whole army.
Because that makes sense.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Like, there's so many.
Okay, well, I didn't research this, but supposedly the source material for King Arthur, the only similarities to this film was, one, the Saxons, and two, the Battle of Badon Hill.
Yeah, that's.
Is that what this is supposed to be? And if so,
this is supposed to be Badon Hill, and they mentioned somebody says Badon
at one point. I think in like the narration, Lancelot's like end of the movie narration, he says.
But even that, like, nobody exactly knows where Badon Hill is. And I mean, I think there's a couple of theories, and I think most of them are in like Eastern England. But it would have been like if there was some kind of battle, because I think it's in some of the sort of early medieval texts that describe Arthur, like the earliest references mentioning like this British general. I think the word they use is actually miles or something like that. Like he's like a soldier or something like that. And he leads the Britons against the Saxons at this battle of Badon Hill and like repels the Saxons, which is what this battle is supposed to be. I mean, again, this is the case of like in Braveheart, where the Battle of Stirling is supposed to be the Battle of Stirling Bridge, whereas like this is the Battle of Badon Hill, but like I don't know where the hill is in this situation.
Yeah, and it brings me back to the eternal question of what archaeological discoveries are they talking about? Like
new archaeological discoveries, Christy, new ones. Weren't you reading the opening crawl?
It's like, is it Hadrian's Wall? Is it Vindolanda? Is it a hill that might be Badon's?
Just new archaeological discoveries.
I know, yeah. So I was very, and I think they must be referring to stuff on Hadrian's Wall, because like why else have the wall really? Because there's no reference to that wall in Arthurian legend. It just looks cool. And at one point, someone calls it the Great Wall, and it was in the subs that I was reading. It was capitalized, and I kind of giggled over that fact.
No, I feel like saying new archaeological discoveries is just like a flashy thing to say.
It's like 9 out of 10 dentists.
Yeah. And
that's what killed me though this whole time. It's like, please don't try to rubber stamp this with archaeological discoveries.
Don't drag archaeology into this.
Well, I mean, in the scheme of life, even if it's an archaeological discovery from the 70s, in the scheme of the field, it's still
it's still very new. Totally.
See, and again, like, had it just been set mostly, and I'm just calling it Vindolanda, like, they're playing knuckle bones. One thing I actually loved with the smashing of so much pottery made me happy.
So much. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's partly why I love The Great, is every time they scream huzzah and throw down a glass, and that makes my archaeological heart so happy.
Haven't counted enough amphora shards in your life?
No, I have underlings to do that now.
Oh, you're so fancy.
I've definitely watched more than enough. I've had, like, I still have to do that fun game of what's in the screen. All right, children, this is pottery. This is a rock.
Oh yeah,
No.
you have to
Once
do that
you've
every
cleaned the
year.
rock and you've confirmed it is a rock, no more screen.
No more screen.
But yes, pottery smashing. I liked that. It was very cathartic for some reason.
Yeah.
Which brings me to, in my picture, are there golden, isn't that like a Kylix or?
That's a Kylix,
Yeah. Are there golden Kylix? Is that a thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe
I think
that
they're
was
like
an archaeological discovery.
fancy and rare, and I feel like, I don't know if it's a big Roman Britain thing, but you can certainly like find Kylixes of various precious metals like in the Greek world for sure.
Just to be clear, we're talking about the cups that they're drinking at
Yes.
around the round table,
Yes.
right? Okay. Just so I'm on board. That sort of wide, flat brim cupped.
Yeah, I've got a great example in the bottom right-hand corner of my background.
Christy, we're doing an audio medium.
But watch the movie and that's what it is. And I was trying to figure out if that was a real thing.
Well, also, in the room with the round table, it's like Pompeian fourth style on the wall. It's kind of funny. I was like, is that fourth style? What's happening?
That's what I was trying to think too. Is like, this is a very well-made fortress, and I need to visit Vindolanda to see. Like, I think a lot of Roman forts, really on the borders, probably did not look this fancy.
Yeah, it looks rather fancy, but I guess it depends on who was there and like how long there was an occupation there, and maybe how much money they poured into it.
By the way, did you guys remember there was a video game of this also?
What?
No.
Yes.
Do tell.
It released on PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube in 2004.
What was the, like, what were you doing?
It basically was apparently a playthrough of the movie, and you would get to, like, you'd go through different scenes, and you get to pick between two of the characters. And it had mixed reviews, but so did the film, and I think, generally speaking, the reviews for the video game were slightly better than the film itself.
Interesting.
Huh. That's like, it reminds me, I don't know if you remember, there was like a PlayStation game for The Lord of the Rings that was kind of like that. It's like you fight your way through the different battles in Lord of the Rings. Those games were fantastic.
Wild.
I wonder if it was that. I'm like trying to find this now.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I searched King Arthur game. I'm coming up with a lot of other.
Add 2004, it helps.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah, I meant to like look at a preview, but I'm just like, oh, there's a game also, and I remember the PlayStation 2.
Oh, weird. Yeah, you're right. I'm looking at screenshots, and it's just like that scene from where they're attacking the wagon in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Wild.
So I guess, did you guys want to talk about the Ice Lake battle? Because I actually like that battle. I'm a fan.
Yeah, we've been jumping around. We got to the end, but yeah, let's go back to the Ice Lake battle.
It just looked like the outside of my house. Sorry, I was just noticing that it's like really, really snowing yet again.
No.
It's like, oh man. So yeah, I felt right at home in this ice lake battle when they're walking across the lake. It's like, oh my god, spread out when like the horses and the carts and like all the refugees, I'm like, spread the out. Oh my god. It was like giving me anxiety.
I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted. I'm looking at PlayStation 2 era depictions of Keira Knightley and Ewan Grufford. It's something else.
Totally fair. No. I actually watched a video, I forget, it's like a military historian specialist, and he like reviews film battles all the time, and he actually reviewed this one. He said like, actually this is almost legit in terms of like, yeah, having your archers aim at the wings to make them cluster.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know like how often people are fighting on the lake, but good strategy if that's
certainly yeah.
And then we came full circle for the last battle of having fire arrows once again. Like,
yeah.
It's like, you can't get away from it.
Nope.
And I was watching it, and you know how like you have fire spread across the entire battlefield. It's like, it's so wet there. Is that really what happened?
I mean, if you put down like what they had pitch and gross shit that they showed them putting around the battlefield, maybe.
That's legit. But it's I really question these fire arrow tactics, because it's like, that's also your agricultural land that you're gonna catch on fire. It seems like a bad idea.
It's not a great idea.
So Ice Lake battle, if it happens, looked plausible. Battle of the Baden Hill, no idea.
Not so much. No, I liked the way the ice broke up on the ice battle. It was really terrifying. It made me feel cold. And I liked that, like, when he stopped and looked down, you could see the frozen face of the guy underneath the ice. Like, that was
We haven't mentioned, but yeah, Til Schweiger as
Hugo
as
Stiglitz.
Sinric.
You mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
with his great like beard braid.
Mhm.
I really like that design choice.
I wish he had hair. I don't know. I like the bearded braid, but the bald head, I was like, really?
I feel like every time I see him, he's always got a shaved head.
Yeah, but he doesn't have a shaved head in Glorious Bastards.
Yeah, he does.
Really?
I think
I
he
thought he
does.
had
Yeah, I'm
hair.
pretty.
Like a little bit.
If he does, it's very short.
Yeah, but he looks so different. He totally has hair in Glorious Bastards.
You're right, he does. My mistake.
He looks so different.
Part of it is also he's like an extremely beautiful man. He has this almost like weirdly perfect face and bone structure.
Yeah. But he looks really weird and ugly in this movie.
He does.
Personal opinion.
Yeah, he is not attractive. But like, are enemies ever supposed to be attractive? Like, that's how we know we don't like them, right?
Well, I don't know.
That or they're coded queer.
There's some sexy
Get
villains
one or
out
the
there.
other. Only women get to be sexy villains.
Give me a second. I'm gonna think of a sexy male antagonist.
That isn't queer. That's the other. That's the other factor.
Shadow and Bone. The Darkling is a sexy male antagonist.
And he's pretty straight.
Okay, I haven't seen that, so to be fair.
He's played by
Ben Barnes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking like before
Killmonger.
Okay, yeah, but
yeah,
Black Panther.
Michael B. Jordan.
Sexy
All right,
male
so like
antagonist.
pre-2010.
No, that's recent. Go back.
I mean, I think Hans Gruber is kind of sexy, but that's just me. I mean, I don't know if Alan Rickman doesn't do it for you, but what about like Johnny Lawrence in The Karate Kid? He's sexy, right? I feel like a lot of there's a subgenre of 80s films where like the antagonist is like a weirdly good-looking blonde guy.
Yes.
That's a thing.
For sure.
That's true. They really just let the assholery shine through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like you're like the trust fund kid. That
is fair. I will give you that.
And I'm trying to think of like an action movie with like a sexy straight male, or at least not queer-coded male villain.
Okay, Jeremy Irons. What's the...
Don't say Scar.
No.
I mean, I picture Scar a lot, but he's definitely coded as queer. But he would be sexy for sure.
Yes.
What's the flight?
What about Gaston?
Like, if they're on the...
He's coded queer too.
Gaston? All right. All right.
I don't know. What's the movie with Jeremy Irons hijacks the plane and Harrison Ford is the president?
Oh, Air Force One.
Yes. Oh my god. Why couldn't I think of that? I'm sorry. I think Jeremy Irons is sexy.
I would have to.
Yeah,
look,
we all think Jeremy Irons is sexy, Eli.
Okay.
That's not a controversial take.
Fine.
I'm just saying, they're like most of the time, especially when you have an army.
Okay.
They're ugly.
Yeah.
Just so it's very clear.
Like all the Conan villains are like
Yes.
real rough looking dudes.
Yes, for sure.
Although, case in point, Commodus.
I mean, yeah, that's true.
He's kind of sexy. He's coded psychopath, Freudian, but
like from you're saying Joaquin Phoenix.
yeah.
He does not do it for me. Never has.
But it's like I could see how he could. Like, just the way that he acts in that movie makes him so unappealing, but I could see like he's not
I guess
bad
we're
looking.
saying like Commodus, yeah, like creepy mother,
Yeah.
but like Joaquin Phoenix is like an attractive man.
Yes.
By most metrics.
Yes.
Even though he may not do it for all of us.
Christy's like, no. Oh my god.
Are we spinning out?
What are we
talking about?
Okay,
Oh
we
my
should probably find a way to wrap this up.
Yeah, I know. Same.
I do have like one final question / Christianity at this point, because I forget what even date are we at?
460 something, I think.
Okay. Are we very on board with Christianity now? Is that the
By
thing?
and large,
By and
I think.
large,
Well,
yeah.
but again, it's that issue of only if you're in the right club.
Yeah.
Because you might be an Arian Christian, in which case things might go sideways on you, or you're a Pelagian, or a Donatist, or, you know, there's lots of like versions of the wrong Christianity. I'm using air quotes for those listening at home. So by and large, most Romans, most people in the Roman circumference, Goths, Vandals, probably not Saxons, but the Romano-British are probably Christian or some flavor of Christian at this point.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I wanted to confirm that. And then what is this film saying about Christianity at the time then? Because to me, it's being equated with Rome, and at the end, Rome is like, this is horrible.
I mean, I think it's like it keeps falling back on the like institution, like organized religion. Those are bad because they breed corruption and gatekeeping and strict hierarchies and, you know, oppressive worldviews, like where the Roman noble is all about like, no, like these people, like I am God's messenger and these people need to live and die for me because I am the word of God, and so says the Pope and he's God and things like that. Whereas like Arthur's flavor of Christianity, where it's like help other people, all men are equal, that kind of stuff, like that's good.
Yeah, and I think some of this seems to be sort of looking forward into more what we would normally call medieval Christianity, with like torture chambers for pagans.
Yeah.
And like serfdom and that sort of thing, which really does begin in late antiquity, and that we sort of see the bones of that sort of start to solidify. But maybe sort of think of late antiquity as a little bit more flexible in so many areas, just because there was this huge like range and variation of flavor of Christianity that you could use.
And even like what it meant to be Christian, like by the Middle Ages, like it very much schematizes into the like you are or you are not, like, you know, you are Christian or you're one of the others, you know, you're Jewish or you're Muslim or you're like a pagan. Whereas like in the like even like around Constantine's time and like the early 4th century getting into the 5th century, it's more like it seems it's kind of because it's being molded onto this kind of polytheistic bedrock. And it's sort of unclear exactly like what it meant, like whereas people is sort of strictly devotional as we might understand it today, or whether people had much looser understandings, or it's like, is this just the new God we pray to?
Yeah. Which I actually was kind of, now that I think about it, a little bit of the way that Arthur kind of used his Christianity, right? Like when he prayed to God, it was very much like the quid pro quo relationship that you would maybe use in a pagan prayer of like, I will like do X, Y, and Z if you allow X, Y, and Z to happen to me and my men.
So much of like the church in this point, and this kind of gets a little bit into like Agora when we were watching that movie, but like the church institutions themselves are really like in these intense negotiations of like what is the canon, what is orthodox and what is heterodox, and like that's the thing, like Council of Nicaea is like trying to figure like like which gospels are in and which ones are heretical, whereas like Pelagius, like Arthur's guy, is ultimately deemed heretical. And so like they're having these sort of power negotiations, and then as it's sort of figuring out its own the structure that's going to take and like who's in, who's out.
Yeah, so I guess that is appropriate for this time period, for there to be clashing views on what is and what isn't appropriate Christianity.
So it seems like this film did that pretty well then, like, because there was a question of like what is Roman, what is not Roman, and parallel to that was this question of what is faith in a lot of ways, what is Christianity and what is not Christianity. Okay, I was just curious because like this is the murky time. It's like it's Romanesque. I kind of know what's going on, but I don't fully know what's going on anymore.
I don't think they knew what was going on anymore. So
I kind of would have liked to see more smash ups of like the pagan gods with, because you get some really cool Celtic Roman gods too and things like that. So that would have been kind of fun to see. But yeah, I think thinking back to Agora, like that's what I was wondering is like it's weird that you almost have these two messages going on. The film seemed to partner them together really strongly, and I was just trying to figure out if that was the case at the time or not, which makes sense for a lot of, you know, different cultures clashing. Religion and syncretism is a big aspect of that. So arguably this film did a good job of it.
Like there's things that like probably if we want to go in with a fine-tooth comb, like much of the costumes and wardrobe and props are like, oh, probably a little ahistorical, but like, you know what? At the end of the day, don't really care.
Yeah.
Yep.
We don't need a Council of Nicaea here.
I want to end on like something sort of like, what would you do kind of situation.
I would make one or the other of these movies. Like, I would make a King Arthur movie or a Sarmatian unit in the Roman army movie.
I guess this comes into the question, and this came up in sort of the Last Legion talk, where it's like, is it marketable, or like, do you need to tie it into like a pre-existing IP like King Arthur? Not that necessarily King Arthur's IP, but he's like a household name to sell tickets. Because like, I think like the fact that this is like King Arthur, who people are like, ooh, King Arthur, like I've seen, Camelot or whatever, like that's a name. Versus if you were like Sarmatians in Rome circa 460.
Yeah,
not that would necessarily be the title.
Yeah. Because in my head it was like, I want Vindolanda. I just want that. And
Christy, you're pitching a movie of just people like milling grain and like washing and like doing very like mundane shit.
I know I keep doing that, and then and especially because like this is a mythology, and I've been listening to a lot of the content on Atlantis and how like Atlantis is not a myth. It's an allegory. It's a myth, not a myth. Okay.
Plato's very upfront about the allegory.
Yeah. But there is this surge, and we can blame Heinrich Schliemann for this. Or, like, we can love him for this, or we can blame him for this. But Heinrich Schliemann took a book of a very old myth, and he's like, I bet this place is real. I bet I can find it. And damn it, he did. Was like, which is hard to believe. And now everyone wants to do that with myth. And I think you're right. Can you really market this? Like, it's very marketable. It's like the origins of Arthur.
Yeah,
it's very appealing because we want those grains of truth in our myths too.
And I think especially in this era of Hollywood, this is not the only movie. Like, this is the true story of. I gotta stop whacking my mic when I talk. This is the true story of X, Y, Z, or whatever. Like, this is this isn't your dad's history class or like whatever. Like, this is what they taught you in school. This is what actually happened. And also, it's metal. Like that. I mean, I think that as like a selling point for movies has fallen out a little bit. I mean, this is just me, but like if they wanted to pitch a movie to Colin, it would be like, this is nothing like what happened. It's in fact better because it's made up.
And then you can just like, there's the Alexander romance. Just call it something like that.
Yeah, this is, I think, maybe the fundamental divide between me and my co-host, which is I want the better fiction. I want the Big Fish version, which is like, if I had the choice between a boring story about like somebody being late to the hospital or an exciting story about a fish and a wedding ring, I want the fish and the wedding ring.
I'm very like that's the same issue I have with like some of the myth retellings where they tried to ground it in reality. It's like, no, the myth is so bonkers and I love it. Please just go with that version.
I talk to my students a lot because like one of the early lectures in mythology courses when I teach is talking about different theories of myth, and one of the earliest theories goes even back to like the 300s BC with this guy Euhemerus, and Euhemerism is basically like it's all just history and we've just dressed it up. And students really like Euhemerism or something because it's kind of this easy, it's almost like it's an easy way out for myth, or it's like but I'm like, and then one of my students I think very smartly was like, I'm like, what's the problem? And she's like, it doesn't explain like why they're so weird and complex.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was like, yes, like that is like they are so. If it's just like another story about a king and his like shitty son or whatever, like we don't need that. But like, why is there a myth about a guy who whacks two snakes and then changed from man into woman and then changes back when he whacks the snakes again? Like that doesn't like. Why does that myth stick around?
And that's what we call fiction today. Like, just Atlantis again. Like, Atlantis is the basis for Aquaman's world. And if you watch Young Titans, they this season did a background on like how Atlantis in the DC universe was formed, and it involves Vandal Savage.
Right, the guy who lives forever.
Yeah, and it's really cool, and I like
Eli,
it.
do you know about this?
No.
So in the DC universe, there's this character named Vandal Savage, and I think the premise is that he's from like Sumeria or something. He's from like the first civilization.
Like he was alive when Neanderthals were still walking the earth.
He's like a caveman, and he found like a magic comet or something like that, and it made him immortal. And he's basically been living forever. And he's like behind the scenes of all this shit, like you look in the background of like Portraits of Napoleon, and like there's Vandal Savage, or like in like Roman friezes, and like there's Vandal Savage. He's just like behind the scenes in all historical events.
Like he gave birth to Ishtar was one of his children, and like he's everywhere. But like basically he's just involved in this huge eugenics project where he's just trying to make the best version of humankind possible. And that involves the sinking of his son's amazing advanced civilization of Atlantis into the sea so they would turn into underwater people, just so that they can further evolve into powerful beings. What? See, and it's great, right?
I just like Googled it, and I love the imagery that I'm getting. You can't see it, but yeah.
Oh, Vandal Savage is he's a great villain. But I was thinking another even just like a problem with that kind of like euhemerist approach or something like that. I'm just kind of spinning off of my own gripes about like teaching mythology. Is like if say like our civilization, goes into decay, and then 2,000 years from now somebody's digging up a bunch of Spider-Man comics, and you were reading like Spider-Man, and you did like a euhemerist approach on Spider-Man, and then you read that, but we're like, no, that's not like, maybe there's actual life events that might have inspired plot points in various Spider-Man storylines, but like, this not to say that there was ever an actual living character that was in any way resembling Spider-Man or something like that. Like you're missing the point of Spider-Man.
And then they'll actually get video evidence of Spider-Man, like different versions of Spider-Man, and they're like, obviously, look, he can physically do this.
Bizarre. Oh, I don't even know how to wrap this up, guys.
Well, I think we're just gonna have to like open these big gates and then let the Saxons in, and then we'll deal with them then.
Okay, that sounds good.
and then we'll have a wedding.
On a Disney note, you got to end on a Disney note.
Yay.
To quote Antoine Fuqua, which is quote, I guess uplifting.
But at least it gives Boris like finally like one of the parting lines like, now I'll have to marry your mother. Who says I'll have you? And I'm like, and I'm like, yes, that's where it needs to end.
Yeah, I think positive male role model. Was Boris actually an early feminist? No,
in this essay, I will.
We should end it right there. Okay. Well, thanks for listening and bearing with us on another episode of Movies We Dig. As usual, you can find us at movieswedig.com. Follow us at @digmovies on Twitter. You can find our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, most other places where you get podcasts. In the meantime, please like, review, and subscribe. It really helps us out a lot. And we'll see you back next week for another movie. So thank you, and bye, everyone. Bye.